We learn about first step of fertilization of a plant, which is called as pollination, and page number are 17 and 18. Students, you remember previously we learned about structure of a flower, and we studied that pollen grains are formed in the stamen, and stamen is the male reproductive organ of a flower. Now look at the video. What is pollination? Pollination is the process during which pollen grains are transferred from anther to the stigma, from male reproductive part to the female reproductive part. And what is importance of pollination, students? Pollination is important in the production of fruits and seeds. Now we shall discuss different types of pollination. There are two types. Look at diagram of type 1. It is called as self-pollination. Now what is self-pollination? The transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of the same flower is called as self-pollination. And look at type 2 diagram. Transfer of pollen grain from anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower of same plant is called as cross-pollination. Look at the diagrams. What is main difference between them? The main difference is that in self-pollination, transfer of pollen grain occur within same flower, whereas in cross-pollination, transfer of pollen grain occur from one flower to another of same plant, not different plant. Now, we shall discuss various ways of pollination. Pollination occurs by insects, animals, winds, and water. Here we shall learn only two ways. First one is pollination by insects. Look at the video. When insects such as bee land on a flower to collect nectar, nectar is food for insects. Pollen grains from the anther of that flower sticks on their body. As the bee travels to another flower, it leaves behind some of the pollen grain when it lands on it. These pollen grains will be collected by stigma of that flower. This pollen grain then unites with ovule that is present inside the ovary, and ovule then becomes seeds after fertilization. And you remember, ovary develops into fruit. Okay. Now we shall discuss pollination by winds. Look at the diagram, students. Anther and stigma of some flowers hang outside it. This adaptation helps them to release and capture pollen grain easily. These pollen grains are smooth in nature and can be easily blown by wind. Through wind, they can be transferred from one flower to another, and this is pollination by wind. Thank you, students.